ASWSU VP, fraternity president, sales representative, VP, CEO. I'm joined by Bill Gruber, who has had many titles in his life and career, and now he's added retired, although he did kind of look at me funny when I asked if retired is the right word, and author to the mix. He has many years of experience in the medical device space and a wide range of leadership experience. And today we're going to talk about all of it. Whether you're an aspiring business owner, a leader, you're really going to want to listen to this episode, and he has so much to share with you, plus something really special at the end we'll talk about as well. Bill, thank you for being here and welcome to the podcast.
Kelsey, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we were already talking off air and I'm like, this is going to be a fun one because the business world is crazy. Is all I'm going to say. And, life and experience is a great teacher.
Yes, and I have a lot of scar tissue to prove that. So
Yeah,
I've made a bunch of mistakes in my career. So,
I
um,
love it. I love it. Yeah, we're going to get into all of it. I want to start at the beginning though. How did
okay.
you end up at WSU?
Oh, that's a great question. So I went to high school in Spokane, and it was you either went to the U or you went to WSU, and my brother was already at WSU, so I said, all right, well, we'll go to WSU, and it was fairly close to home, and never looked back.
That's awesome. I love the straightforward kook answers. We're just like, duh. I was in the 509. I'm going to go to this school. And now you're not even in this side of the time zone of the country.
No, I live in been in Boston for 30 years.
That's
So
awesome. So, what did you study at WSU?
So I was business with emphasis in finance with a minor in econ, and then
Okay.
ultimately did on-campus recruiting.
Oh,
And that's how I got my job with Procter and Gamble right out of school was through on-campus recruiting.
oh, wow. Did you know going into college that would be your major? Are you the person that kind of had the like 5 to 10 year plan, or how did you stumble into that?
Yeah, it's good. I wanted business. I just didn't know, how that was going to shape up, and I'm shocked that I ultimately ended up selling soap and then ultimately selling, medical devices and running medical device companies. I
Yeah.
would have never had thought that that's how things would progress. But I think everyone's career is kind of this circuitous path that ends up surprising them at the end of their career.
Yeah.
That's the way things went.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And I think that, I mean, we kind of already talked about it a little bit, but academia is great and provides a lot of opportunities and tools. But then so much of it is people and just chance conversation. And it's like you just never know where that takes you to. And I think that's so true being a Coug.
I would agree. And I think the thing that I love the most about WSU is the people, right? The people make the place. There's no doubt about that. And and that's true with even the companies. The best companies that I was with, it's all about the people,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's the fabric of the organization. Without the
Yeah.
people, you don't have a company.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, I think there's a reason you feel very passionately about that topic.
Yeah.
We will dive into that later. What you were involved in college, because I also think you have the vantage point of hindsight being 2020 for you. Of course, all of us do, right? But what were you involved in college? And then how did that set you up for your career?
Yeah, that's good. Good question. I think the leadership, I think the benefit of WSU was the leadership opportunities.
Yeah.
There are so many opportunities on campus to be involved, and you can be involved with whatever group you want to be involved with. For me, I was fraternity president, and then ultimately went on to ASWSU roles and found that those were the people, those were the types of things that I wanted to be involved in. And ultimately, as ASWSU vice president, you spent a lot of time, lobbying for higher education, really pushing, to make sure that we're getting the appropriate funding we needed from the Washington State Legislature, and then also the political issues that we were having on campus. And so all of those were great education for me. The ASWSU president also runs the student senate, so you're the chair of the student senate. So again, another leadership role. So all of those things were certainly building me as an experienced type of person who ultimately could accept managerial roles later on in my career. And so I think just getting involved on campus was tremendous. And I look back at my college career, and that really made a difference on my
Yeah.
ultimate success and ability to stop working, retire.
I love that. How you graduate college, what was that first job? Like, what was your role? How did you get it? I think everyone's answer to this question is so different. And especially in the business space, I'm just really curious what your very first stepping stone was.
Well, so it was we were all kind of interviewing on campus, and I was
Yeah.
interviewing for, a bunch of different jobs, life insurance. I was like, I don't want to sell life insurance. And so then I did Procter and Gamble, but I just kind of did it as, whatever, and I'll just try it. I know nothing about Procter and Gamble, so and so. But then ultimately, I really enjoyed the people that were interviewing me, and they run you through just a gauntlet of, tests and interviews and everything else. And then they made me a job, and at the time, I think it was $23,000 a year, and I was like, wow, that's so much money. And so ultimately, and everybody was saying great training. So I took the job. I was transferred to Portland, Oregon, and started selling for the packaged soap and detergent division, which was Tide, Bold, Cascade, Dawn, dishwasher, liquid, all that. And I was calling grocery stores. And I'll never forget. So I'm probably a month in after all the sales training and everything, and I'm in a grocery store on my hands and knees doing a new shelf set for a packaged soap display and thinking to myself, wait a second, I went to college as a finance,
Yeah.
major, and here I am, dirty on my hands and knees in grocery stores. And that was kind of a wake up call to me to, I'm like, boy, is this really what I thought I would be doing when I was in college? And it wasn't in the slightest. But what I did figure out real quickly was the people there were absolutely awesome, and everyone had similar leadership roles within their college careers. And in the end, I looked at it as a great platform to learn as much as I could about selling, about leadership, about management. And so I was there 5 years before ultimately I got recruited by a medical device company to come to work as a sales rep. So I had progressed into a managerial role with Procter before I left and went back to being a sales rep with Boston Scientific selling medical devices.
From soap sales to CEO.
Well, it's funny, at the time, Boston Scientific heavily
Yeah.
recruited the Procter and Gamble folks because they wanted you to have all that sales training. So
Oh,
at one time in marketing, we had 18 of us in marketing at Procter, or excuse me, at Boston Scientific, and 12 of us were ex-Procter. And
wow.
and in fact, some of us, once we joined Boston Scientific, were same guys that I went through my Procter training with.
Wow.
Right. So it was a great training ground, and Boston Scientific knew that. And Boston Scientific's sales reps at the time were either Gallo Wine or Tupperware or Black and Decker or Procter and Gamble, Lever Brothers. So they said, "Hey, if you guys know how to sell, we'll train you on the medical device side of the business."
My mind is I literally in front of me have a sales training right here that I just led my community through right before this call. And I didn't know we were going to go here, but I think we have to go here. WSU, we love you. This is not a negative, but I think sales is a missing gap in education. And
Oh, I
especially just
totally agree.
okay, let's go there, Bill.
Yes. Oh, I totally agree. So I
How'd you learn
think
to sell?
And so that was Procter, right? So Procter was brutal, right? So you could go to Procter and Gamble, you go to Cincinnati, Ohio, you put you in a hotel for 2 weeks, the initial 2 weeks, you go to the basement, and they'd walk you through the 5 steps of persuasive selling, and they had huge binders, and it was extremely formulaic, right? As to how gain favorable attention, and then you go through the 5 steps and ask for the order, close. And so you would do this, and you would have sell sheets, and they would videotape you selling to a trainer, and then the whole audience would get to look at your video, and while you sat in the audience, everyone would critique you. They critique your mannerisms, they critique your voice inflection, they critique what you said, how you did it. And so it was the most humbling thing ever because you just felt like you were as low as could possibly be. You're like, man, I'm worthless, right? But then the next person would do it, and the next person would do it, and you learned really quickly with that kind of direct feedback. And then you go back out into the sales field again and practice what you learned over the 2 weeks for another month or two, and then you'd go back and you'd go through advanced sales training, and they'd blast away again based on what you had learned and what you had been doing. And so after, 2, 3 cycles of that, you were starting to pay attention, right? You're starting to get better at this stuff. So
Yeah.
ultimately, what I came away with was that everyone is always selling, right? The one thing I learned early in my career is that we're selling ourselves we're selling a product, we're selling an idea. That's all of us are selling. It doesn't matter what we're doing, whether you're a physician or whether you're a service provider or even whether you're writing code. You have to be good at selling the concept or selling your idea to others, right? So I do think there's a huge blind spot in all of, college education of just raw selling. I think that would be a great course is selling. And so, I think it's selling and then problem solving and decision making. When I go look for people to staff a company, I need problem solvers and decision makers. So if I had good people who could sell and people who are good at problem solving and decision making, voila, you win, right? You're going to hire great people. So Kelsey, I couldn't agree with you more. I just think that's a huge, huge deficit and a sales course. I mean, who'd not want to take a sales course? It could be super fun. You're going to be in college. Everyone's going to be role playing, right? It's because you have to be a role playing, it has to be a role playing environment.
Yeah.
And the other huge, huge thing that I think is missing in higher education is negotiating. It's kind of like sales, but one of the things I took a ton of negotiating courses after college over the years and read tons of negotiating books. And there are two courses I'd take in college today, which would be sales and negotiating. Because I just don't think it matters what field you're going into, they're both going to help you.
Yes. So much yes. I joke that I just realized I'm in sales like 3, 4 years into having my own business. And by the way, as you grow, you're selling the vision to your team and then they're selling. So then that really adds this another muscle that you have to build because you need to get people on the same page as you
Yes.
and they're not you, so they're never going to care about it like you do. So I love that a finance guy from Spokane like really tapped into this. And I would argue sales, I mean, I don't know your journey. I know your LinkedIn, but I would argue sales had a big piece to play in how you were able to grow out of that role and into other roles.
Well, and so, I think the thing that really you recognize it. So I'm selling soap. I'm
Yeah, yeah,
22,
yeah, yeah.
23 years old. I'm selling soap. Then I go in to sell medical devices. That's a bit different because now I'm standing in the operating room and
Yeah.
I've got my sample bag in the corner. And now, as we're doing the procedure, I'm talking to the doctor about maybe using my devices or how my device might be able to help in this particular instance, right? Or I'm seeing the doctor in their office talking about patient conditions in which my devices may have an impact, right? So, okay, I got selling in soap, I have selling in med device. So now I'm done with Boston Scientific. I was there 10 years. So now I'm off and doing my own company and I'm having to raise venture capital money. Well, nothing is selling like going out and begging for cash from venture capitalists to support your idea, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you talk about sitting in front of a phone dialing for dollars, that's it. And you're selling your business plan, you're selling yourself, you're selling your team, you're selling them on the fact that you can give them a 5x or a 10x return on their invested capital. And that is, so it just doesn't, the selling just doesn't stop, right? So
Yeah.
nothing when so right now I sit on some boards of startup companies and one of them's out there raising money right now and he's a sales guy. And I'm like, dude, this is just sales, right? We're just going back, right? It's the 5 steps of persuasive selling that they taught me in the basement of Procter and Gamble in Cincinnati. It's just the product's different. The product's you. The product's your company. The product's your idea, what you're going to do, right? So it
Yeah.
just doesn't stop. I think, in hindsight, I would have been a bit more prepared had I been able to take a sales class early on because it's what we do, just like you said, Kelsey.
Yeah, I just think it's such a important skill set to have and so many people don't recognize. It's like going to the gym and not working on the specific muscle group and then you wake up one day and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I have never worked on my biceps." And I'm comparing myself to these people who've been doing it for years and years and years. And I want to grab these people and be like, "It's you're just getting started. That's okay, but you do need to build that muscle. It needs special attention and it needs practice. Theory is great, role playing is great, but at a certain point, you just got to pick up the phone over and over and over again."
Yes, and the one thing I think that I learned out of both Proctor and also fundraising is that you've got to at the end of the sales call, you have to get back in the car and review where you botched it, right? How'd you screw it up? What'd you do? What could you have said that would have made things go better? And where were you not listening? Where did you misinterpret, right? And so, you know, and Proctor was like that. After before every sales call, you'd review it. You'd walk in the store with your manager on your side. You'd go through everything. You get back in the car. The manager would say, "Let's start at the top. You said this, they said that. You said this, they said that." And it was really terrific because a lot of times when you're in the middle of a sales presentation, you're not listening to yourself. You're so focused on the next words coming out of your mouth. But the other thing that it really taught me is that great salespeople are great listeners, right? And only when you listen are you able to understand what the other party wants. And then you can figure out how your product, your service, or you can deliver what the other party really wants, rather than assuming you know what they want.
That's so true. It's so good. And I imagine you see that in so many different ways and all these different titles that you've held and now advising and helping these startup companies. But the principles remain the same.
Yep, I would agree.
Yeah.
Totally
Yeah.
agree with you.
I want to hear more about how you navigated your career. So you went, I didn't realize that you stopped and you had your own business and then you ended up, is that the business that you retired with? Like bring us up to speed on all of that and the steps it took to get there.
Yeah, so I did Procter for 5 years, then I did Boston Scientific for 10 years. I started out as a sales rep, did that for 2 years, then I got promoted to product management, and so then I left the sales territory. And my territory was Oregon, Idaho, Montana. So I would just call on hospitals throughout Oregon, Idaho, Montana. I was traveling every week, calling on cardiologists, surgeons, and interventional radiologists. So I go back to Boston, and all of us in product management were ex-sales reps. The only way to get into product management was to be a sales rep. And so, and these folks were good. So you had to up your game. If you showed up, if you were cocky, you were going to be put in your place because these people were super bright.
Yes.
And so then I was a product manager for probably 3 years and then got promoted to manage other product managers, called a market manager, and was the director of atherosclerotic diseases. I had been there 10 years and the company was starting to make a lot of promotions from outside. So rather than promote from within, they were promoting from outside the organization. So said to my boss, I'm thinking about leaving. He said, I'm thinking about leaving too. Why don't we go together? So we both joined an orthopedic company. He was the president and I was the vice president of sales marketing, and it was a struggling spinal products company. And I knew nothing about spine. So I just had to pull out all the anatomy books and start just sucking the words off the pages so I didn't sound like just an uninformed person. So in the end, I learned as much as I possibly could and then hired independent sales reps. And this company had invented a new procedure for doing lumbar and cervical fusions. And so we did that for better part of 5 years, and that company sold to a bigger company. And so I left there and got hired for a brief stint raising money for a cerebrovascular firm. And again, didn't know a lot about the brain vascular anatomy, so I had to work with a guy real closely who's been a lifelong friend now on vascular anatomy. And so we'd go around and watch brain surgeries. And so then a venture group contacted me and some of the guys I had known from my Boston Scientific time and said, "Hey, we're looking for an entrepreneur in residence to come to work. We'd like to do something in women's health." So I went there and they said, "We like women's health, but we have no idea what to do." So I looked at 5 different areas of women's health, did a market analysis on all 5 areas to figure out which opportunity would be the greatest. And we said, this is the place. It's removing fibroids from women with abnormal uterine bleeding. Let's figure out a device to help with that. And so they said, okay, here's some money, go hire some people. And so I did, and we created a company, and it went exceedingly well. We invented a device that took probably an hour-long surgery down to about 10 minutes. It was still an operating room procedure, but we designed it to be used in the office, and nowadays is being used in the office. And we had $1 million in trailing 12 month sales when Hologic came and bought the company for hundreds of millions of dollars. And the investors were elated because they made a bunch of money. And now that they do 500,000 procedures a year these days, right? So about
Wow.
$500 million a year in sales, and it's terrific. And then after that, The same venture company came back and said, we have another one that's really in trouble. Can you come run this one? And so I did that one for 10 years. And unfortunately, that one was a failure in the end because we couldn't get the device to achieve statistical significance in a clinical trial when we went out. So we did a redesign, and part of that was COVID. And this was stress urinary incontinence in women, a device that would go in the bladder to help that. And with we did our clinical trial, started a clinical trial right during COVID, and it had a quality of life component. And that was the problem, is that COVID affected everybody's quality of life, so that had an impact on our trial. So in the end, we ended up shutting that one down. And I said, okay, I'm out. I'm all done.
That what a wild ride for you.
Well, like women's health, who would have thought I'd go into women's health, right?
Yeah, just your the quick like mountain peaks you highlighted there, but it makes sense because the foundation, again, the foundation, the principles are the same. So I'm curious, again, 2020, I know experience in life, like sometimes we end up where we end up, but if you were to go back in school today, wanting to do what you ended up doing, what would you have done anything different? Would you have studied something different? Like
That's
today's educational and just the way things are, the digital world.
Yeah, that is a great question. Well, I tell you what, the one thing I would do the same, which I would never change, and that is getting involved on campus. I
Yeah.
would say that campus involvement and because you also meet the greatest people, right? From other that live in other places on campus that are involved in, other things with campus. I just think that those relationships I still have to this day. They're fantastic. I think the leadership roles on campus are fantastic. I do think my business degree was terrific. Like you said, I think we should have a sales course, maybe even if it's there's a quarter of sales and a quarter of negotiating. But those two things, I think, are things that I tended to learn outside of school that could benefit absolutely everybody in school. Regardless of your major, you have to be a business major for that. So I do think if I were to go back today, I, you know, we didn't have laptops, believe it or not. So, I bought my first IBM luggable computer with a student loan. I was like the only guy in my fraternity with a laptop, but it was a luggable. It weighed like 40 pounds. It wasn't really a true laptop. But anyway, I think today, I think getting involved on the computer side of things certainly helped me throughout my career as well.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Agree. 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 As you were talking about a new muscle that you obviously had to build to get to where you are, which is leadership. So we talked about Procter and Gamble kind of equipping you with some great sales foundations. How did you learn to lead? When did you start realizing that was a muscle you were having to work on as well?
Yeah, so well, when I first got promoted at Procter and Gamble, it was funny. Here I was probably 23, 24 years old, and I had five people working for me, and they were all at least twice my age. Every single one was twice my age. And they would roll their eyes at me like, okay, here's the next, snot-nosed kid in here to lead us, right? And so that's when, I was like, wow, okay, these guys, you can't just tell them what to do. You got to start listening because they know so much more than I do. These guys were so much more experienced than I was. That to go in and just start to lead. And so I think that all of us, we get into leadership positions, kind of have this imposter syndrome, and it's justified. We haven't led before. I'm leading guys that, are similar age to my father, and so that to me was extremely humbling. And they were really good, but I still had to give them performance reviews. Here I'm 24 giving some guy who's 60 a performance review who's been out selling. But you do it, right? But then real quickly you learn to listen, and you also learn to respect them, right? That you don't just try to be a leader. Leaders listen, leaders understand. And then the other one was read. I quickly became just a voracious reader of self-help books, right? As much as I could possibly read, I did, about management, about managing others, about listening, about negotiating, about sales. I just would read as much as I possibly could, and listen to tapes. I was in the car all the time, so I'd listen to cassette tapes.
OG podcaster over
Zig
here.
Ziglar cassette tapes in my car
Yep.
on how to sell product, because he would sell pots and pans door to door, right? So, driving through Montana with my medical device sales bag, listening to Zig Ziglar tapes. So, whatever I could get my hands on to try to learn. And then as when I st- after and then I learned a lot at Boston Scientific. But when went out and started running medical device companies, leading medical device companies. I think that I had enough there to get me going, but then quickly started to, I kept reading and kept looking at what other people did to try to be successful at leading people. Because now I'm leading really smart people, PhDs, people with higher
Yeah.
education. And these guys are smart. I don't have a PhD, right? I just have an undergrad. And so, but these people are looking at you for direction. So
Yes.
then it starts to be a little different, right? Now you're setting direction. You're just as we had said early on, you have to sell kind of the future, right? You're selling the plan. You're selling why they should come to work for you. What's in it for them professionally? What's in it for them for helping others, right? And in medical device, that's pretty easy because we're always helping others. And that's how my leadership skills kind of developed. And ultimately, what I decided to put on paper was, okay, is there a plan here? And I started to figure out that if you link a couple of things that some of these other people are teaching, that management starts to get really easy. And these people start managing themselves, right? And part of that is you've got to paint an image. You have to have an overriding thesis or plan, right? You've got to have some mission that no one could do on their own, but as a team, everyone could do. So figuring out what that mission is super important. And then figuring out what everybody's doing every day, how does it link to the mission so they feel like their job's important? Because if people don't feel like their job's important, then they're miserable, right? And so having an overriding mission and everybody knows exactly what they're supposed to do because they have a mission, they have objectives and key results, and those key results and objectives all go towards achieving that mission. Everyone knows what each other's doing. Everyone knows that they're all focused on one thing and nobody has some obtuse little pet project that doesn't affect anything, right? And no manager is doing some stupid little project on the side because everyone is accountable to making sure that their daily tasks are focused on the overall company's mission. And that is super important, I think, right? And it
Yes.
was then after that that we started working on values, right? So we also need values in our organization, which you can call them values. It's also game rules. How are we going to treat each other, right? What do we think is important on how we work, right? Is family first or is family last, right? Are we going to work 80 hours a week and that's what we're going to demand of everybody? My attitude is no, right? If you're not happy at home, you're sure as hell not happy at work. But my attitude is that we want bad news early was one of ours, right? And so things that wait, people hide stuff. By the time you learn about it, it's usually really expensive to fix it later on and takes a lot more time. But things like that, or hedging everything. How do you hedge things? How do you make sure you have a backup plan for all the things you do? Right? That's super important as well. So we just wrote a list of all these things that we wanted to do. We posted it all over the company, and that became the game rules. And as long as everybody started playing by the game rules that they had come up with, man, management got super easy because these guys all set the rules they wanted to manage themselves by, and were all focused on the vision. So wow. The other thing is that when you had an outlier, a bad hire come into that group, they don't last long. They're really
Yeah.
uncomfortable, right?
Yep.
So they'll self-select out. They'll be like, "Wow, these
They'll
guys are
opt out.
driven. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm done."
Yeah.
They'll pull that card and get off the train.
I that's so the parallels in our world, even though how we got there and who we serve is different, Bill, it's wild to me, but it's so important. And people don't realize how important it is. And where my brain immediately goes in is to hiring and retention, because I think there's this misconception that it's hard to find good workers right now.
Yes.
And okay, and you've come from a place where the people you're recruiting, they were the PhDs, the heavily educated people. And I would venture to guess you do these leadership things, you have these really clear values and rule books. Hiring and retention doesn't become a problem anymore. I mean, for the most
Exactly.
part.
So what I did is I created what I realized was that you really do need to hire based on values. Because if you
Yes.
hire based on values, then people who join your team have the same values as everybody else and they fit in really well and they're really eager to get working. So you need to create a recruiting program based on the values that your team has. And so that's what I did. I put together this whole recruiting program with the help. I read books and looked at other people's recruiting programs. and said, okay, I need to customize my own recruiting program so that when I go out and recruit, because my biggest mistakes in my career are crappy hires, right? I've made some really bad hires,
Yeah.
and you wear that tattoo and you don't forget it, right? I
Yeah.
mean, that
Yeah.
hurts. So having a recruiting program that matches your values is super important. You're hiring like-minded people into your organization, and so that's what I did. I created this program, and then making sure that you are using other people in your organization to execute that program. So everyone in your organization is using the same program, and you're having team interviews so everybody's understanding whether these people do have the right values when they join you. So if I'm hiring somebody who's going to report to me, I may do the first interview with somebody else, but then the second interview is two other people in the company, and I'm not included because I need to get their opinion of whether their values are there,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
The other horrific mistake I would make was I was so excited about our values that the new candidate that I'm talking to, I would spend the first 15 minutes telling them about how great our values are and what all our values are. And what I was making this cardinal sin was I was telling them all they needed to say back to me so that I would think they had the same values that I did, right? So I quickly learned that I don't just gush about our values. I just dig right into the interview, protect my values a little bit, hold my cards closer to my
Yeah. See
chest,
if it lines up.
right? And then see if what they have, because otherwise they're just parroting back to me what I just told them. And I'm like, man, they have all my values, right? When, of course, they didn't. So so again, more learning, right?
Yeah.
And then the other one, I think the last part of what I learned in management was this part about tours of duty, right? And so is the organization giving back to the employee, right? Is the employee feeling like they're growing within the organization? Because if they don't, they're going to leave,
Yep.
right? And honestly, if you as a boss or as me as a boss, if I can't help the employees grow, they should leave. Good
Yep.
employees should leave and go somewhere else where they can learn and grow.
Yeah.
And so I think it's super important, and I think it should be formalized, right? I think there should be a tour of duty within each organization that the employee tells you, "Hey, I want to get better at these things." And then you work to make sure that you offer them the opportunity within the organization to get better at those things. Otherwise, they're not going to hang around and you're going to lose all that. And in fact, if you can move them in other parts of the organization, they become a much more valuable employee because now you have different divisions of the company or different departments cross-talking to each other. They're because they used to work in those other areas, right? So the communication within the organization dramatically improves when you start moving people around the organization because they used to do each other's jobs. And then what happens is is the whole organization benefits rather than people feeling like they're just working in a silo and they're never going to get out of the silo. And the only way to get out of the silo is to leave. And then you've lost all that tribal knowledge that that person had about their job. And you, as the boss, have to go figure out what they were doing because you don't know because they just bolted and went to somewhere else where they're going to get, better training or better education or feel like they're going to be more valued. I've always
This
felt
is.
that if somebody
Yeah.
left my company, it was my fault, not theirs, right?
Whoa.
I didn't create a place good enough for them to learn and continue to grow. So it's my bad, not theirs, right? So
That's powerful. Yeah.
so
That's
anyway,
true.
so that was the culmination of I said, okay, I got to write this stuff down.
I was just gonna say, obviously, just hearing you talk, there's so much experience wrapped into what you're saying, but there was a tipping point where it went from, okay, this is internal process to I'm actually gonna write this in a book and help other people with it. So what was that tipping point for you?
It was right after the last company, at the end of the last company, and ultimately we had to shut it down, but everybody there was operating at such a high level, and management was not a burden, right? It wasn't this drudgery. Because, like the other, like I don't believe in performance reviews. I believe you should be talking to your people in a sit down for an hour every month, right, to cover their objectives and key results rather than wait till January of the following year to sit them down for 3 hours and go over what they were doing in January of the previous year
Yeah.
and then February and March, and then you did this. That stuff sailed. That stuff's long gone, right? We need to be talking about what happened last month and the business changes, right? Objectives change, things change. You have to have new objectives. We reset your objectives every quarter rather than set annual objectives. The businesses we're in, you're in, Kelsey, I'm in, things are moving much faster. They should be moving faster. We should be recalibrating on a quarterly basis. So it was at the end of that company, I said, it would be really beneficial if I had had all this knowledge 30 years ago, 40 years ago, right? So that's what's precipitated me like I gotta start writing this down. So I could help Bill Gruber of 40 years ago maybe take a shortcut or two along the way and not have to get the scar tissue I had to learn, to learn things later in life. I became a better manager much later in life, and so I'm trying to maybe help others do it earlier.
Shorten the time horizon. I love it.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. And I definitely want to make sure people grab the book and access it. But I also, before we do that, I have 5 rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Just answer what comes top of mind, off the
This is
cuff. They're fun, they're
this is
harmless. Are you
okay.
ready for
This is
it, Bill?
stressful. Okay.
Okay. Question 1. Where's your favorite place for a meeting in Pullman?
Favorite place for a meeting in Pullman? Probably, probably the Coug.
Awesome. Number 2. If you had $10,000 and could start any business today, what would it be?
Probably a book. I think more people should write books. Doesn't even cost 10,000 bucks. It's just a time thing. Everybody has something great to share.
Yeah. Okay, I feel called out. Number 3. What's the biggest challenge of being in the C-suite and being a business owner that you've experienced?
My board members used to say, "What keeps you awake at night?" Right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
for me, it was the stuff that I didn't know. I was fearful of what I was missing. And I think
Mhm.
that's the challenge of a CEO. You think that you've got your hand or you've got a pulse on all the departments that are going on, but as you lay awake in bed, you're like, I know I'm missing something. I just don't know what it is. That's the struggle. I think entrepreneurs, right, you have to be wildly, wildly over the top optimistic and also completely paranoid. You have to be able to you have to have both of those things
Yeah.
running around in your brain, right? That's what's hard.
But that also is what makes you able to do that job. So yes, I respect the answer. I respect the
Okay.
answer. Okay, number 4. What did your time at WSU teach you about running a business?
I think it's all about the people. I think WSU's fabric is its people. And I think that was something that really kept going throughout all of my roles. Every role I had, it was the people.
When you were talking earlier about the importance of values and hiring off values, I thought of WSU as that pool of people, cougs. Like that immediately is going to be a tick in the right direction of values because it takes a certain kind of person to come over to Pullman, choose to
It
have an
does.
education there. And I think people listening, whether you're in leadership or you have a business and you are hiring, what if you started looking there? Because I would imagine most cougs you talk to are at least a little bit aligned value wise with you.
I would agree wholeheartedly. I think there is a set of values in all of the people that are cougars that transfer really, really well to the kind of people you want to hire and work with, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
when you look at an employee, you say somebody once told me that and this goes back to the kind of the Cougars there, they asked themselves 2 questions. One, would I have them over for Thanksgiving, and would I grab them if I needed to go to battle?
Hmm.
Right? Those
Yeah.
two kind of things. And you could look at all the other Cougars and say, boy, if I'd have you over for Thanksgiving, I'd go to the Coug with you. Or, right? Is this a person I could rely on if I needed to go battle something? Right. And part of
Yes.
that is I think Cougars are self-sufficient. I think Cougars are entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
right? I think
Yeah.
Cougars, you and I talked earlier. I think before we ever went on, Cougs are really good at managing risk,
You have to be.
right?
Yeah. And shameless plug if you're listening, Cougs First can be a conduit for that. They actually have hiring fairs. They connect. If you're a Coug business owner, they'll connect you and help promote that you're hiring. If you're looking to get hired, there's opportunity there. So, shameless plug for those that didn't know that. But rapid fire number 5, staying on track. If you could teach a class at WSU, what would it be?
Sales negotiating.
Done. Yes. Call this man up, everybody. But hey, they don't, I mean, they don't need to hire you to do that. They can just go buy your book and probably learn a couple things there. So let's direct the people. Where can they find this book? What's it called? How can they support you?
The book is called The Leadership Blueprint, and it's on Amazon. And you can either you can or you can go to my website, and there's a link there to Amazon. My website's www.billgruber.com. There's billgruber.com. And again, it's every kind of the general things I've talked about here is having a plan for managing a high developing team. And I tried to make, and it's not that long. In fact, it's not even a book. It's more like a pamphlet, Kelsey. It's only 105 pages long, so it's about a 2 hour read. Somebody could fly through this pretty quickly. But it's all based on me making stupid mistakes in my career and trying to figure out what the right plan is to manage a really high performing group of folks. And I am very lucky I got to work with some of the best people on the planet in med device.
I love that. Thank you so much for your time and your wisdom today. And I love that you shared a tool that can help Cougs too. So I just really appreciate everything, Bill.
My pleasure. It's been really fun talking with you, Kelsey. Thank you so much for your time.
Awesome. Thank you. And thanks for everyone listening. We'll catch you next week.
Go Cougs.
Go Cougs.